Hello friends, Jerry Rosa here in the Rosa Stringworks workshop. I have a video for you today that's going to be about working on setting up a fiddle, and we'll show you that in a little while. And I'll put a little text box below here that on the bottom of the screen that tells you how far you can advance forward if you want to pass this front end up. But I wanted to put this little front end on the video because of a couple of reasons. Number one, I've been getting a lot of relatively personal questions, and I don't mind answering them. And also, I just wanted to make a couple of announcement type things. The first announcement is that we finally hit 2,000 subscribers. That's pretty good. I guess we're going on 2.5 years or so, it's not too bad. You always want more, you know how that is. Actually, we're almost to 2,100, so we're doing good. Thank you very much for subscribing. Tell your friends about the channel. Keep up that stuff. That helps me out quite a bit. The personal side of the questions are, about my income and about my, that I must be rich and to have a farm like this and a whole bunch of things like that. Well, let me just address all that. And Certainly, I am not rich. I am a long way from rich. Am I poor? No, I'm not poor. But if there was such thing as a middle class, it's kind of disappearing in America these days. But I would probably be somewhere toward the middle class. We have enough to get by. But like so many of you, I'm sure, that have experienced living from paycheck to paycheck. That's pretty much my whole life. I pretty much live paycheck to paycheck. Because of that, I have learned to do everything myself. Well, then you say, well, how did you afford a farm like you have? Well, okay, the way I afforded a farm like I have was I did the legwork and spent a lot of time looking for a place. Tried to put in deals on a lot of different farms, couldn't make deals, and finally we found this place. And I'm going to tell you the story on this, and I think it's interesting and amusing. I hope you'll like this story. But there was a website in the St. Louis area that dealt in executive properties. Now, I'm not an executive. As a matter of fact, I only reached second line management for AT&T, and I retired early in 2001 from them. The way I retired early was that I always invested 10% of my paycheck into savings account for all those years I worked there, about almost 30 years. And they allowed us to move our money from guaranteed interest savings to stock market and buy AT&T stock. Well, whenever the stock would go down, I'd move my money into the stock, and whenever the stock would go up, I would move it back into guaranteed interest. And I made a lot of money doing that. Sure didn't make it on my paycheck. That's how I made my money. And so when they offered an early retirement in 2001, well, I took it and then just turned the money over to an investment broker. And once again, I'm living paycheck to paycheck. But anyway, I was trying to tell you how I bought the farm. Well, since I was going to try to retire early, I was looking for a place. And there was this website up in the St. Louis area that dealt in executive properties. Well, I was checking any website that was dealing in large estates or large farms and things like that. Well, this one, on a Monday morning, I remember distinctly, it was like 9:30 in the morning. I was looking on this site and there was nothing there. Well, at 9:30 that night, my phone rang and it was my brother-in-law, and he says, "Did you check so-and-so's site today?" And I said, "Yeah, there was nothing there." He goes, "You better check it again. There's something there now." So I look, it was like I said, 9:30 at night, and it said 280 acres, surrounded by Mark Twain forest, gigantic lodge type house, just went on and on and on and on about all the, the buildings and springs on the property and lakes and, not lakes, but ponds and just different things. And I was expecting at the bottom that it was going to be $1 million, that type of thing. Well, it said 250,000. And I thought, 280 acres? This gigantic house, 2 wells, another rental house, and then barns and everything. And I'm going, that can't be right. So I literally just got into a hyper frenzy fit and started calling, and I ended up getting the realtor out of bed at 10:30 that night. And literally got him out of bed. And I said, Mister, I'm taking off work tomorrow and I'm going to go see this thing. He goes, well, you're in luck. He says, tomorrow's the first day we're going to show it. And he says, unfortunately, you're going to be fifth in line. I said, fifth in line? You just put it out there today. How could it possibly be fifth in line? He goes, well, I'm sorry. He said, there's a couple flying in from New York City going to be there in the morning. There's a couple driving in from Oklahoma City. They're going to be there in the morning. And there's two other couples from St. Louis. You'll be the third couple from St. Louis. I said, oh, you got to be kidding me. I said, well, what time should I get there then? He goes, well, I don't really know how long that's going to take. If you could get there late morning, that'd be good. So I pulled in around 9:30 or something, I was anxious. And sure enough, there was 4 cars in front of me, his car plus 4 others lined up in front of me down the driveway there. But it was immediately obvious that this place needed a lot of work. My wife, when we drove through the gate of the place, she just went like, oh my gosh. It was trashed. I'm talking trash, not like a little bit of litter. I'm talking trash like the city dump. And but that didn't faze me because my dad had a landscaping business and I could see through stuff, and see what something was going to look like, And when I grew up with that landscaping business, I knew how to take care of a place and fix up a place. So that didn't faze me. I sat there patiently waiting, in the car. And it was I think it was around 2:30 that afternoon or 2 o'clock that afternoon, literally, that we sat in the car that whole time. And finally, I got my turn to talk to the realtor. I go up to the realtor in like a hyper frenzy mode, and I said, did you get a contract yet? And he's like, starts to stutter because I'm just eating him alive. He says, no, but the people from Oklahoma are going to buy it. And I said, well, what do you mean they're going to buy it? They didn't give you a contract, right? And he says, no, but they got buffalo and Appaloosas, and they're going to put them out in this big field, and they're going to buy it. And I said, wait a minute, back up the truck. Did they give you a written contract? No. I said, well, then they're not buying it because I'm going to buy it today, right now, right here on this spot. And he's going, well, don't you want to see the house first? And I said, I don't care what the house looks like. I don't care. I said, if I have to, I'll doze the house down and build a new house myself. And I literally meant myself. I mean, I'm not going to hire that out to somebody else. So anyway, he just was, overwhelmed because literally I was eating the guy. It was like a shark on a feeding frenzy. And I said, the only thing I want you to do is I want you to call the owner. And I knew his cell phone worked because he had been on it all day. I was watching him, and I said, I want you to get on your cell phone and I want you to call the owner and tell him you've got a guy here that will give a cash offer, a cash deal today for $210,000. He goes, well, this is the first day we've shown it. And he's asking $250. He's not going to take $210. I said, mister, I'm not stupid. I know that's the issues. I said, but I want to hear you get on the phone, call the guy, and make that offer. And so he says, okay. So he gets on the phone. He says, Bob, I've got a guy here that says he'll give you $210 cash today. Would you take that? And then I can literally hear Bob answer. Bob says, no, but I'd take $235. And I said, sold. I'll take it. $235. Of course, I would have taken it for $250 because anything you can buy under $1,000 an acre is a pretty good deal, So it ended up being, I think it was $835 or something an acre that we paid for the place with all the buildings and everything. But now keep in mind, it was trashed. I mean trashed, like the city dump. There was refrigerators, there was old stoves, there was old car parts, there was just everything piled everywhere, all over the farm. Not to mention, it had once been a very big, thriving cattle operation, and there were literally miles of broken down wooden fences. And they were so broken down. They looked really cool if they were up and working, and it would have been neat to restore it, but I couldn't have afforded that. It just had to come down because it was so bad. So anyway, the first thing I did after we got the place was I bought a Bobcat, and here's the other side of that. How do I afford a Bobcat on such a meager income? Well, I afforded the Bobcat because my childhood friend and my brother's best friend growing up, now owns St. Louis Bobcat. So he gave me an awesome deal on a Bobcat, a backhoe, and a set of forks and a bucket. And then the rest of the stuff I've made myself. So anyway, I got a great deal on that, which not too many people would get, and helped me afford that. And that's what I used to clean this place up. So I didn't retire that early. I bought it in '98, and I didn't retire till 2001. So from '98 to 2001, and I'm not exaggerating when I tell you, I came down here almost every single weekend. You might have found 2 or 3 weekends in that whole time that I didn't come down here. And every weekend, all I did was clean up trash. And I mean, I had piles pushed in, like fencing piles and stuff. Just gigantic piles. I had flames going in the air 75 feet. And the whole valley, this is a large valley across here. It's 1,000 feet across the valley. And the whole valley glowed yellow at night. So, I mean, it was a job. But I did the work. And that's how I could afford it, because did I pay cash for it? No, I just made payments. I still owe on the farm. So, the point is, I just wanted you to get to know me. I'm not crying poor mouth. I'm not crying, that we're wealthy or anything like that. I just wanted you to know the story. And I hope that helps explain it. It just took a ton of really hard work. Now the place is probably worth, I don't know, 4 times what I paid for it at least, if not more. When the economy was good, when the real estate was good, I would say it might be worth a couple of $1 million, but it's not good. So, it's worth probably 4 times what I paid for it at least, though. But that's all on paper. You can't eat paper. So, anyway, like I said, we basically live retirement check to retirement check, and the income that I get from working on instruments helps a lot. I do have that one old house fixed up for rental, and I'm going to fix up my old shop, but I just haven't been able to afford to fix it up, and that's the honest truth. I just haven't been able to afford to. Once I get that fixed up, well, then I'll have another rental income coming in, and that'll help too. So I hope that clears up the the personal questions about my wealth, because there is none. It's just, I'm not crying poor mouth. I'm not saying come help me or anything like that. I'm doing fine. We eat okay. As a matter of fact, I eat too much. I'm putting myself on a diet as we speak too, and I'm gonna fix that. I'm really tired of looking at my videos and seeing how fat I am. So, anyway, that's the whole story on that. I hope that makes some sense to people, and you enjoyed that little story there. And like I said, I was on a feeding frenzy when I heard the price on this place. It was like, that's a once-in-a-lifetime deal. You don't pass that up. Now, the reason the other people didn't jump on it, literally, was because it was such a mess. It was just a disaster mess. I mean, it was a mess. Oddly enough, the actual living quarters weren't that bad. It just needed work, and I've been working on that over all the years I've owned it now. I've been working on that and trying to fix it up, and I've already told you sad stories about how much wood it takes to heat the place, because it is a gigantic lodge-type house. It's just huge, and it's all concrete floors, and attic is fairly well insulated, but the walls are not. And so whenever I do work, I fur the walls out to 6 inches and put better insulation in there. But it takes a lot of time, a lot of money to fix up a house that big. So anyway, that's the story. Thank you for listening to this, and I hope you found it at least interesting or a little bit amusing or whatever. And we'll get into that fiddle repair now, and fiddle setup more is what it really is, and you'll see how that goes. Thanks for watching. Got another little fiddle to work on. Actually, this one's in pretty darn good shape. The customer believes it was made in the early 1800s. I am not really that sure of that. It's possible, I would say. It does look like it could be that old. The patina and everything. Though it does look like it's been refinished to me. The neck is not grafted, which is an indication to me that it's probably not that old. But I am not the end-all expert on this stuff. I just see a lot of them and know quite a bit about them, but I don't claim to be the expert or the know-it-all. Not at all. this one I think has got the potential to be a really nice violin, so we're going to do a few things to it. It's got a cheap fretboard on it. It had cheap tuning keys. So I've already just stuck them in here. I don't have them cut the length or anything, or really worked out that to detail, but I've got new ebony keys in here. I've got a new ebony fretboard for it. This fretboard could have been salvageable, but it's got a great big crack down in there that's actually, you can feel it's kind of deep. So, and it's already loose. You can probably hear that. So anyway, you know, while we're at it, we might as well just make it nice. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to fix it up, just set it up real nice. I'm turning on the light here where I can read inside it. This says John, or well, it's abbreviated, JOH period, BAPT period, and then Schweitzer. Schweitzer is how I would say it. SCHWEITZER. And then it's got the Facit at Farman. So it's FECIT at FARMAN. And then finally the last line here is, can't pronounce this word, Hieronym. I've seen it before. HIERONYM. Amati Pestini 1813. So that's everything that's in there. So I guess it's an Amati copy. It is a solid back, so that that would indicate Amati to me. So it's an Amati copy. Schweitzer, I assume, is German. I'm not really sure. I didn't look this up. I'm sure you can find out details on the internet. I don't really have a big inclination to do that, although I may, and if I find out any details, I'll post them in the rest of the video. Okay, on the fiddle, I've cleaned the neck. The fretboard, the old fretboard came off really easy. I've scraped this down to bare wood with a single edge razor blade, and I narrowed this fretboard down, the new one, and I've also thinned it down because it was just, you know, rough and bulky. And so I've got it looking pretty good. It fits pretty good. I've been checking the height. It's about 840 thousandths, which is you know, it's over 3/4 of an inch, and that's about what I'm looking for there. And what I'm doing now is I marked the length of this, the neck on here, and I'm basically hollowing out some more of this tail just to lighten it up. I'm using my little finger plane. Well, as you can see, we've got the clamps off. It's been glued on there. It turned out real nice. The height looks just about right, and of course I measured all that ahead of time. And the only thing now is it's a little bit of glue squeeze out rough and a little bit of rough edges right along here. And what we will do is we will, most of that is the ebony is a little bit wide. So I take a, this is a fairly, it's a double cut file, but it's a fairly fine cut, double cut file. And I just get the worst of it off with that first. And when I can see that I'm just starting to touch the edge of the neck, just like right there, then I'll switch to an even finer file. Feels pretty nice. Now I go to an even smaller file, which even cuts finer, so it's almost like sanding. Really can't feel it now, so now we'll get some like 400 grit sandpaper and smooth it out even a little bit more. But just mostly concentrate it up on the ebony just to make the ebony really smooth. And we'll blend it slightly to the neck. Now it's just glass smooth. Yeah, it's just glass smooth. Now you can't feel anything, it just slides. Really nice. And that's what you want. Now the top up here's got a little bit of glue that just got on my hands and got up on the neck there. So what I do there is I just to get the whole fretboard cleaned up, we'll just take our single edge razor blade and we'll clean up the whole top of the neck now. Nice and smooth. Just go over it a little bit with the sandpaper just to make it glass smooth. We pause this video for a public service message. By the way, if you would like a sandpaper tip, aluminum oxide sandpaper is, in my opinion, now everybody's got their opinion, in my opinion, aluminum oxide is really the only way to go when it comes to sanding wood. Silicon carbide, you can go over the top of the aluminum oxide with silicon carbide later if you really want to get a glass smooth finish or something like that. Silicon carbide, I think, in general works better on metals, or it works great on finishes for wet, like when you're wet sanding a finish. Silicon carbide is the way to go. That's that wet or dry sandpaper. So it's awesome paper. Don't hear me say anything against it. That's not what I'm saying. But in terms of just general woodworking sanding, aluminum oxide, you just can't beat it. Garnet paper, stuff like that, is just, in my opinion, you're wasting your money. So aluminum oxide is the way to go. This new sandpaper, in my opinion, that Lowe's is selling is even better yet. This stuff here is awesome. It's called 3M Sandblaster Pro, and of course it says right here, sold only at Lowe's. And this here says P400 325. So I don't know if this is 400 or 325, to be honest with you, but I guess it's 400. Anyway, what's really cool about this sandpaper is two things. Number one, it does not load up. How they did that, I don't know. But you can sand and sand and sand, and it just doesn't load up like other sandpapers do, which is awesome. The second thing is that it's got a kind of a, not a sticky exactly, but a non-slip kind of grip. It's almost sticky that you can feel back here, and so it's easy to hold on to. So this is the sandpaper of the ages right here. I can't recommend it highly enough, and I'm not getting anything from Lowe's, trust me. They don't know I'm telling you this. So anyway, it's available at Lowe's. It's Sandblaster Pro. You can get it in various grits, but like 400 grit is awesome when you get down to that real detailed fine finish. You really want it glass smooth. 400 is great for woodworking. Now you might need to go quite a bit higher when you get onto your actual finish, which is again the silicon carbide type paper. But anyway, just thought I'd pass that along to you. Hope that helps you out. We fitted up a new end pin now for the fiddle. So it's in there absolutely tight. You could pick the fiddle up with that, no problem. It's there to stay. And we're going to put a adjustable tailpiece on this. I like these. These are a composite. I don't know. The metal ones might be better. I really don't know. I've been using these composite ones for years, and they seem to work just fine. They're a little less expensive. And you can break them, though, if you're not careful. What I do is I back this up all the way, all the way up, so that we'll do all the tuning with the rough keys first, and then we'll do the fine tuning when we think it's stabilized. We'll do the fine tuning with this. For those of you who may not have seen a composite tailpiece, this is what the underside looks like. It's hollow, more or less. Your loop goes through and back, and what you do is you take one end off of the loop, and you slide it in from the inside out. You put it back through, and then you put the end back on. The ferrule is what I'm calling the end there, the ferrule, the little brass ferrule. Now these extra pieces that are hanging out there, once you get it adjusted, and the way I adjust it is I literally just put it on here, pull it with my hand forward that way, and I look at it and see that it's gone past the little tail block here. It's gone past there about a 1/16 of an inch, headed straight across. So once I get it about there, then I think that's a pretty good adjustment. And then I come back here and I pull it back in, and I cut off all this excess. There's no reason to have a lot of excess here. I'll leave about a 1/16 of an inch exposed, something like that. But there's no reason to have a lot of excess. Just something else that could possibly buzz or rattle. And so that's how I adjust a tailpiece. Moving up to the peg box, I'll just show you a couple of tricks that you want to pay attention to when you're mounting your pegs. often the pegs I buy are much oversized, so they have to be turned down. I have a lathe and a jig, and you've seen in other videos how I turn those down on the lathe. These pegs came properly sized, but what you want to take note of is when you put it in there, you want to check and see, does the peg wiggle? And often, like the small side over here will be tight and the big side is loose. Well, then the peg wiggles. That's the case with several of these. So I just take my reamer, go in here very lightly. I'm not trying to take a lot of wood out, and just remove a little bit of that wood on the smaller side until the reamer starts to grab on the big side. And as soon as that happens, then I call that good. And now I put the peg in there, and then I don't see any wobble in the peg now. So, and you got to be careful about all that. I mean, you want to keep your pegs even and everything, so you want to make sure they're through about the same amount on all sides. Once I get that set like I believe they should be, then I take a pencil and mark around the peg like this. And if you're really paying attention to what you're doing, when you do this, you'll see that one side of the mark, well, it's hard to explain, this peg box is tapered. So what I do is I leave the most peg I can, I guess is the best way to say it. It's hard to say. Exposed on the other side. So I just watch the way that the line is tapered there, and I cut to the longest length of the taper. So now I'll cut this peg off to where the longest mark is on this. And then I'll round it off and we'll put it back in there, and that way you'll just have a nice round knob on the other side of the peg box. You can see now that I have cut them all off to length. There's just a little knob coming through on each side. I mentioned earlier that you check this taper on your pegs to make sure that it's making good contact, and I said that the small end was grabbing on these and the large end was loose. Well, it's also possible that it could be the other way around. In my case, that's the way it was, but in your case, it could be that the large side is grabbing and the small side is loose. So you just really need to look at that very closely, because you want both sides to be grabbing on the peg. Otherwise, you're not going to have a good tight peg and you'll always have problems with it. Regarding bridges, when you buy them, I buy them unfitted, and so you have to fit them to your violin. And I mean, you might get by with a fitted bridge and get it to fit your particular violin, but I find that they're all different. So I buy them unfitted and fit them to the actual violin. What I did there was I just used a pencil to kind of follow the contour of the top. The feet come extra thick, and so you want to cut off a lot of that extra meat. And I do that with a very sharp chisel that I pretty much only use for that purpose. Now, you can't take off all of it at once. If you do, it will chop the end of the foot off and make a mess. So you just want to shave off a very light amount each cut until you get to your line. If you try to get aggressive here, you will mess the foot up, I guarantee you. I'm shaving off pieces that are probably as thin as a hair. You can see the little shavings there. That's actually two thicknesses of shavings there, so it's a very small amount there that I'm shaving off. And you can see how many shavings there were just on that one foot here. Put them all up on top of here. You can kind of see how many shavings I had just off of that one foot. Now that foot is much skinnier now than the other foot, if you can see the difference. And it's not completely done yet. That's just roughed out right now. Now I'll shave off the other one. I have ruined a number of these over the years, so I've learned to just take just the tiniest bite that you can with your chisel. And if your chisel's really sharp like this one is, then you can do that. If it's not real sharp, you're going to break it anyway. Break the wood I'm talking about. There you go. That's worked out real nice. Also, there's, I see it all the time. The label on violins, on the violin family instruments, the label generally goes to the back. Most everybody turns it to the front, but anyway, I turn them to the back. And the bridge is actually cut that way too, so that's why you need to turn it to the back. There's actually a slight taper to one side of this. Anyway, that sits on there pretty good. I can still see problems with it. The toe end needs to come off on that side, I can tell, so I'm going to do that a little bit more. Don't have a lot to work with now, so it's got to get down to the details here. Pretty good. Toe end needs to come off on this side too. Looks pretty good, stands there by itself. That's one of my tests. Will it stand there by itself? And it stands there pretty good. Now I'll take some of that 400 grit sandpaper we were talking about. I just lay it right on here, and I visually know where the bridge is going to ride. I lay it right on here like this, and then I go side to side with it, but just a very, very, very small motion. You'd probably be better off going forwards and backwards, but you get chatter, and it's hard to do that. I do that a little bit and the other thing is, when you go forwards and backwards, you'll round off the edges. So I generally just go side to side like this, but very, very, very small motions. I'm not going a long way, you know, just a very small amount of movement. And I find that I get the tightest fit that way. You know, there's a million ways to skin every cat when it comes to violins and instruments, so, you know, I'm already sure there'll be a lot of people say, no, you got to go this way. Well, that's fine. You know, if that's the way you learn and that's the way it works for you, then do that. But this works for me, and I get a very, very tight, airtight fit this way. You can see how much has been removed just with the sandpaper there. Now it looks just airtight. It looks really good. So now the next thing I do, and the way I do it, is I take a pencil, and it just works out that a pencil gives me the height that I like to use on my setting up violins. Now keep in mind, I've set them up for bluegrassers and country people for 90% of the time. And what I do is I take this, and I don't go straight across like this. I don't do that. What I do is I take this and I let it go up the ramp, kind of like that, and then I come across on this side and come across and meet it. What that does is it gives me that proper offset. This side of the fretboard over here, the treble side, is generally a little less curved, and then it drops off on the bass side. And I'm exaggerating a little bit, of course, but that gives me that curve and that drop off. Now what I do is I only use this line as a visual. I don't cut necessarily to the line. I will probably leave it about a 1/16 of an inch, or maybe even a little bit more than that, higher than that line. And then we will shape it, and then we will thin this all down too. You can see there's the line, and there's about how much I left. And you can see that this side's a little flatter, and then it drops off a little bit harder on the bass side here. Now we'll just erase, we don't really even have to erase the pencil line because we're going to carve that away anyway. The thickness of this is just crazy thick in my opinion. You can see how thick it is, and it's going to be a lot thinner than that when we get finished. And I do all that with my little finger plane. Now this is a tricky operation. If you haven't ever done it before, you can break this little centerpiece out of the bridge. So you have to be careful in the way you do this. I found if you go straight down it, that little centerpiece won't break. If you go at an angle, you'll break that off. So when I get to the centerpiece there, I go straight at it. The rest of it I cut at a slight angle because it just cuts better. The idea is you want to remove enough wood to let it vibrate real well, but enough wood needs to stay there to keep it strong. So it's just an experience thing. I just kind of have a feel and a know of how thick, and just by looking at it I can pretty much tell. I do take off a little bit of the thickness up here by the feet, but the actual feet I usually leave them where they are, and I just go from the base here down as a straight angle, as a nice slope. You also have to watch that you don't break off these little tiny pieces here will break off too. So you got to be careful when you're doing this, but it's an experience thing. I've learned how to do it where I don't generally break those things off. Although it's possible, anybody can do it. I would say the top up here, and I'm just guessing, but I would say the top up here would be roughly a 1/16 of an inch. We can measure that to just give you an idea here. What, 60? It's right at, of course it tapers, so it's hard to get right on the very edge. But I'm pretty close. I'm about 66 thousandths, which is in the ballpark of a 1/16 of an inch. 1/8 of an inch is 125, so half of that, what is that, 62.5? So I'm pretty close to a 1/16 of an inch, and I'll probably have it a little thinner than that by the time I'm done here. It looks good, it feels good, so it must be good. Now I'll take that same sandpaper, lay it flat on this. This is a Formica top, so it's very hard, flat, and I just keep a nice level, even pressure all the way across the bridge with 4 fingers that I'm using here, so that it's really pressed down good and level. This aluminum oxide paper takes it off very quickly, and that did a nice job. It's very nice looking, flat. So that to me is what you're going for. Now you can see that it's much thinner than it used to be. Much thinner. It's probably half the thickness that it used to be. There's 2 more main components that we have to work on before we can actually string this up. One of them is this nut. We have to make a nut. The other one is there's no holes in these brand new pegs. So we'll get a drill bit that will be just slightly bigger than the biggest string, and we'll drill all the holes with that. The trick on this, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take them out of here to drill these, don't get me wrong, but the trick is you want to, I see this wrong all the time, and so I really want to point this out. So often people will drill the hole over on the small side of the peg. You want to drill the hole on the large side of the peg, approximately 1/8 of an inch from this side of the peg box. For instance, this large peg here, we're going to drill the hole about 1/8 of an inch inside this wall. And on this one, we'll drill it about 1/8 of an inch inside this wall. And the reason for that is the pegs are always going that way. And the more you tighten them, the more you pressure them, the further they go that way. So if you drill the hole over close to the small end, well then pretty soon your string is underneath this side of the peg box, and you don't want that. So I see this done wrong all the time, so I just wanted to point that out. Drill it close to the large end of the peg, closer to that side of the peg box. That'll give you room for the string to migrate across over time. This one's 52 thousandths. This one should be just about perfect. So it's just a few thousandths bigger than the other one. Not that much, only about 5 thousandths bigger. But that'll be just enough to make the difference. I just want, I'm thinking about future string changes. I'm sure I can make this work the way it is, but so this one's just about 52 thousandths or so. I have a notch cut in my table right here, which is really perfect for laying these pegs in here, holding them with my left hand, and taking the drill and centering it very carefully and getting it centered and going through. I just reamed the hole out there now, and that should probably be just perfect. Yep, that's just perfect. It goes right through. There's no slop in it. It goes right through, though, without forcing it through. So that means all of the strings should go through, since this is the largest, the G string. So now I'll put that one back in. I'm very careful to keep all the pegs in the same holes. I've already marked them with a pencil where I need to drill the holes. So now I just put them in my slot here and very carefully center that drill bit on the center of that peg. I try not to force through the peg either, because you'll get tear out on the back side. I like to let it drill its way through nice and easy. You still, no matter how good you do it, you'll get a tiny bit of tear out, but it will reduce it a lot if you're careful. Then I just run it back through the opposite direction one time just to make sure the hole's clear. I might add, as you start the drill bit here, sometimes it'll want to wander a little bit, and before you get into the wood, you can rotate the peg a little bit and then make sure that you're drilling center. So that's what I do. I get it started and then I rotate it ever so slightly to make sure I'm drilling center to center. Does a real good job that way. And okay, there you go. You can see that the hole is drilled closest to this big end of the peg, and the same way with all of them. If we twist this around, you should see there. So anyway, that way the string will always be working its way away from the wall and not into the wall. You can see I've got a little piece of ebony wood. This actually came off the edge of a fretboard. It was just scrap wood. But anyway, it's plenty big to make this nut out of. So I stick it through where I can draw the profile with a sharp pencil. I can draw the side profile, and then I also draw the underneath profile. And I can take that over to my saws and sanders and just barely leave the pencil marks, and then we'll know we're good for size. I've worked this piece down to where it fits real nice. Now I'm looking at it and I say it fits real nice, but it doesn't actually. It's not sitting flat on the bottom here. Part of that I just see is because there's a little bit of glue squeeze out that's sticking out there and it's sitting on that glue. So let me get rid of that. Okay, now it should sit there pretty good, I think. Yeah, now it's just about perfect. Look down under there. Actually, it still doesn't look perfect. It's close, but it's not perfect. So, the back edge of it is still riding a little high. So I'm going to take and just trim it ever so slightly. To get that back edge down. And I'm talking probably the thickness of a hair. Now that feels good. I don't feel any movement at all. I'm sure now if I look at it I won't see any movement. Nope, there's nothing there. It's perfect. Okay, so now we'll glue that up tight, and for this I have just gone to using a dab of super glue. It just seems like the simplest way and the fastest way to keep the production going. The hardest part of this step is just getting the super glue to come out the nozzle. Mine's always stopped up. I don't know if anybody's found a way to avoid that, but if you did, let me know. Just one little tiny drop is all it takes. And then I work on making sure I've got it perfectly centered and tight. And then I will often spritz it with the accelerator. Just to make sure that it doesn't move. Now after I do that, you can always feel something, so I just take, you know, whatever it takes to clean it up. I've got a little chisel here just to knock that little tiny little bit of a corner off. Okay, now all we're left to do is to mark the slots here and put the strings on. I've started putting the strings on. I've got the G string on. I just thought I'd tell you the order in which I do it. I always put it on in the order of the closest peg. So this is the closest peg to the bridge. So I put this one on first, then I'll put this one on, then this one, then this one. And that way, because you're going further and the strings will get in your way if you do it in any other order. So this way the strings stay out of the way the best that you can expect. I used to use these little ferrules that they leave on the strings, and over the last several years I've decided that they're just more trouble than they're worth, and I always take them off. I don't have trouble with them biting into the bridge like some people do. These are good bridges, and so I don't use that. When I put strings on, I'll try to zoom this up and show you how I do it. I keep tension on the string like this. As you can see, it's wrapped over my thumb and my hand is around it like this. It's already attached to the tailpiece. So let me zoom in on the peg box. You can see that I start winding it, and I wind it away from this side, from the big end. I wind it away from the big end a couple of wraps, about 3 wraps. Then I cross back over and I let it wind itself back to the peg box. That keeps the strings nice and straight, and they won't slip. So I don't know if you can see that very clearly or not, if it'll focus, but it makes a nice, neat job when you wrap them in like that. And now, just by eye, I cut the notches for the outer 2 strings. Of course, I use my close-up glasses on this, and I just kind of make sure that they're even going up the fretboard. And just make up my mind of where I think that spot is, and then I just cut that with my saw. As you've seen me do before, the spacing on this part I do by trial and error. It sounds silly, but I do. I just pick and make a mark right here where this string is and just guess about how far I think this should be. Put a mark there. So now I'll put a mark on the wood right there. Come across here, put a mark on the wood, and then come across and see if the strings line up. In that case, they almost perfectly line up. So I can adjust it by just the slightest amount. It just needs to be the very slightest amount wider, and then they'll be exactly even. So that's the way I do it, and it works out really well. It makes them nice and even visually. You don't have to do any measuring that way. And I also just barely file the mark in here to begin with. That way I can always move it a little bit if I need to. So I'm just very lightly scoring it. It's not going very deep at all. And that way when I get the other strings on here I can look at it, and if it doesn't look centered or perfect, then I can move it slightly by refiling it, because we're still plenty high. Okay, the next string is the D string. We'll put that one on. Sometimes, like down here, these are hard to get on. So what I do is I take a little tool to help me push it up in the slot. The slots, these have a lot of serving wrapped around the string, so it's a little hard to get in there sometimes. So I'll just take an extra little tool and help me force it in there. Wiggle it a little bit and it'll go in. This one's extra thick for some reason. It doesn't seem like it wants to go, but I'm sure we'll get it in there eventually. There it is. Sometimes you have to go push it in a little further and then pull it up through. You have to go past where you want it a little bit sometimes. Okay, now we're back at the peg box again, and I push the string all the way through This hole seems a little tight actually for some reason. I guess this D string has a little more serving on it than the others do or something. So I'm going to go ahead and take time and drill that hole out just a tiny bit more. Alright, I drilled it out just a tiny bit more, and it goes through there fine now. And now I do my same trick. I wrap it and going the wrong way away from the big end of the peg. Then I come back over it after I get a couple of wraps on it, and that helps lock the string in there where it will not pull out. In case you're wondering, the bridge end down here, I don't have any notches or anything cut in these yet. I just let them float there for right now. And we have the final A string to go on. Okay, doing the same exact thing, wrapping it a couple times, and then crossing back over. And now you can see the peg box looks very nice and very neat. Perhaps it'd be better to see it this direction. Very nice, very neat job. The strings look pretty even across there. If anything, these two middle ones probably need to go that way just a fraction of an inch. And as I recut those grooves, we'll move them that way. It's not a problem. Down here at the bridge end, and I haven't measured it yet, but I use 325 millimeters as kind of my standard. And that's just about where it's at, so pretty close. Now I'm going to, just by eye, separate these strings out and try to get them in the right places. I'm looking down the fretboard, making sure the strings are in line, the bridge is in line. I've got the bridge at the right length from the nut to here is 325 millimeters is what I use. I've taken and spread these out. I like to spread them out across your bridge so you're using the whole bridge. A lot of times you'll see them set way in instead of using the outside edges of your bridge, they're set way in, and I don't like that. So I like to spread them out. I feel that it spreads the sound out a little bit better, does a little better job of transferring the sound into the top. Again, you can use my trick of taking a pencil lead and marking the first two strings, checking those out, and then checking them again, see if they're the same. They look the same. Those look the same. So I think I've got it pretty well matched up. Now what I do is I just take a very sharp pencil and draw on both sides of the string. Then since there's not much tension on this, I just take the bridge out, and then I take a three-cornered file, and I just very lightly score it between those two marks. And I'm also angling it slightly up from the back of the bridge. Doesn't take much. I don't put a deep score. These, as the strings get bigger, a little bit more, but not much. I don't cut them very deep at all. Just enough to hold the top of the bottom edge of the string. And I stand it back up, center it, measure the length one more time, right on the money. And now she's ready to tune up. We'll bring you back once we get her done. Here's a little bit of the way it sounds. Now keep in mind, I don't make any claims to be a fiddle player. I'm not. I just play one enough to know how to set them up and make it. So here's my lame attempt at Maiden's Prayer. That's about as good as it's going to get with me. But the fiddle sounds pretty good on its own. It's a very nice fiddle. I'm pretty happy with it. I think the customer ought to be just elated. It's a very nice fiddle. Thought I'd just show you what the case looks like that I got for the fiddle. These are real nice cases. They're inexpensive, don't get me wrong. They're not the high-end cases by any stretch. They're foam-filled type cases. They're lightweight cases. But it gives you very good protection. It's nice and soft padded on the sides. It's got a little strap to help hold the instrument in. Room for a shoulder rest. Back here there's a compartment where I've got the rosin and a strap. The case comes with a strap. It holds 2 bows and a tube for extra strings up here that you can just barely see, it looks like. And so it's got a humidity meter in here too. And got a nice little cover that lays across the violin like that. Of course, it's got this upper zipper where you can keep papers and things. And then it's got the outer zippers that zip around, close it up. The only negative of the case is the latch itself. It's a pretty cheap latch, I have to admit, but you know, the zippers really do take care of that part anyway, so it's not a big deal. But it's a pretty nice case for the kind of money that we have in them.